This is Charles C.W. Cook, actual British person. Many have asked, National Review, you seafaring magazine, will you finally sail the Atlantic? Our answer? Yes, emphatically. Join us August 31st to September 7th aboard Cunard Line's spectacular Queen Mary 2 on NR's 2017 transatlantic crossing. This affordable, once-in-a-lifetime experience on many a bucket list sails from England to New York. On board will be conservative stars including Tom Coburn, Michael Mukasey, Mark Halperin, Rich Lowry, Douglas Murray, Ricochet regulars like Rob, Jonah, Jay, James, fellow Mad Dog Kevin, and many more. You know you want to come. Do it. Visit nrcruise.com to get complete information or call 888-283-8965. Every Ricochet member who signs up will get a $50 cabin credit. See you on board.
Hello and welcome to Q&A. I'm Jay Nordlinger, and this podcast is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. I'll have more to say about them later in the show. Our guest today is Ben Shapiro. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire. He grew up in L.A. He went to UCLA and then to Harvard Law School. He's the author of several books and is altogether one of the most prominent conservative journalists in America. Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I saw the movie La La Land. Is that what your hometown is like? It seemed awfully glamorous. I wanted to move there immediately.
Well, I mean, it was much cleaner in the movie. It's pretty dirty, actually. It was as a city. They show all the nice parts of LA, even the parts that are kind of sketchy in the film. That would be like top notch LA. That'd be the stuff that goes for $1 million a house, and all the streets. Apparently, that was the one time they'd cleaned them, was right before they'd filmed it. So, yeah, it's also people don't randomly break into song. It's more likely that they randomly break into screaming at each other because they're being stabbed by a homeless person or something. So it seemed like a nice place, not the place where I live, but it seemed like a nice place.
Bummer, so deflating. But the UCLA campus is beautiful, is it not?
Oh yeah, UCLA is actually really nice.
Yeah. The Daily Wire, I never know, I don't know what terms to use for journalism anymore. I don't really say newspaper. Website?
Yeah, website.
That seems too generic and weak.
I would say it's an opinion journalism media outlet, which makes it sound a lot more shockingly glamorous than it is. So, but yeah, I mean, that Daily Wire is the website, and we are, I would say, an upper level mid-major website. We have something around the range of 25 to 30 million page views a month.
I like the idea of a wire. That's an old term in journalism, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's why we picked it. So I still have a tendency to enjoy the old terminology.
Ben, how did you get to be a conservative? Were you born that way? Did events shape you, or something you read, or what?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a conservative house. So my parents were both Reagan Republicans. The last time either one of them voted for a Democrat was Carter in 1976. And it was a religious Jewish household. So we became fully Orthodox when I was 11. And the overlap between religious Jews and conservatives is very, very high. So while there's this widespread public perception that all Jews are to the left, that's only Jews that aren't actually observant. Observant Jews vote about 75-25 Republican.
Mm. And Ben, were you a bit of an odd duck on the UCLA campus, in a religious minority and a political minority, or as I think they said in a movie, did you blend?
I definitely did not blend. I was always trouble. I was the only conservative columnist on the newspaper, and it was the most widely read column on the paper because I had a monopoly basically. But it was it was always fun. I enjoy being in lefty areas because I enjoy the conversation, I enjoy the discussion, and so I always had good experiences at UCLA. I also knew enough to know that when it came to professors, the best thing to do, and I still give this advice to college students, is try and gauge whether the professor is going to grade you down for your views. Say anything you want in class, but then when it comes time for you to actually do your test, write what the professor wants you to write, because it's not worth sacrificing a grade just to tick off the professor.
Such a shame. such a shame that even comes up, but I understand very well. My impression is that you visit a lot of campuses today. I mean, in your career.
Oh, yeah.
And many more campuses than I do. Do you find that people are happy to see you, and the conservatives are kind of gratified, and even some people on the left are sort of curious and at least hospitable, or not?
Yeah, 100%. No, I do think that's the case. It really depends on the campus. I think there's a kind of a fringe group that is really unhappy about it, and it varies in size from campus to campus. At Penn State, for example, there was a protest that elevated to them trying to break down the doors while I was speaking. At Cal State LA, there was a near riot where they had to call out the police, and there were helicopters, and I had to be escorted on and off campus by an armed contingent of about 20 cops. But that's a rarity. I speak at 25 to 30 campuses a year, and like this week I'm doing 2 of them. We don't expect there to be any problems. It's usually a packed house, usually with standing room overflow. And the vast majority of people who show up are conservative, but I really enjoy it when people on the left come. I always give them first priority when it comes to asking questions. I say that they get to go to the front of the line because it's more interesting to have those conversations than to talk about what we agree about. So, I think that it's interesting because I've sort of been caught in the I would say the overflow of rage on campus, but it's definitely bizarre to me because I've actually never had a run-in with somebody on the left that's really brutal, except for some of these near riots and protests that are usually coming from kids who I have to imagine they have no idea who I am, and they've never read anything I've said. It's just that professors have been telling them that some member of the KKK is coming, and they assume that I must. Yeah, exactly. I must be that guy. So I go to University of Wisconsin, and they call me and they call me a KKK member and a white supremacist, and I'm standing there in my yarmulke, and it's kind of weird.
I think of a great phrase from long ago from Ed Banfield, rioting for fun and profit.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we saw some of that at Berkeley recently.
Yeah, and I think it was for Milo's fun and Milo's profit probably, but yeah.
You got it. I often say, Ben, that I don't know what to read today for journalism. Things are so confusing, and everyone has his own media. As they say, everyone curates his own media. They're reading separate things. Outlets belonging to their tribe, and it would be nice if we had sort of common places to go to, and we could agree on certain facts before we started expressing our opinions and arguing. It's a wonderful and rich media environment, but I find it confusing. Let me cite something in particular. For years and years, people like me, people like us, have invaded against the so-called MSM, the mainstream media. And sometimes I sometimes think that conservatives have taught people too well. Because, for example, when I'll cite a story from, let's say, the New York Times or the Washington Post, someone will say on Twitter, you've linked to the Post. Epic fail.
Yep.
So if they don't see it on the Drudge Report or at Breitbart or from Fox News, it doesn't exist. And I'm not sure how to navigate an environment such as this. I've been rambling for a minute, so let me just have you respond in any way you like.
I think that's totally true, and I've been spending an awful lot of time thinking about this lately because I feel like we're now living in a fact-free environment where if you read the Huffington Post, you get one set of facts, and if you read Breitbart, you get a different set of facts, and it really isn't a different set of opinions about the same facts. They're legitimately different facts, and both sides actually determining that the facts the other side are bringing must, just by the nature of the person who's bringing them, be ruled out of order. That's actually a pretty dangerous environment, and that's reinforced by social media, where Facebook has algorithms that are going to direct you to the media like the ones that you've already liked. So if you like a story from Breitbart, you're probably going to get a story from Breitbart or the Daily Caller. You're not going to get a story from Huffington Post. And so what I've sort of determined is that, number one, I think that the idea of a media outlet being reliable is sort of overblown now, because every reporter has such resources at his or her disposal that there's certain reporters that you can rely on and certain ones that you can't, because there's certain reporters who seem to care much more about the truth than others. So, for example, at CNN, I wouldn't trust a lot that comes out of Christiane Amanpour's mouth, but I trust a fair bit that comes out of Jake Tapper's mouth. They're two very different reporters from the same network. If I cite something from CNN, is it necessarily false just because CNN has a left-leaning bias? Or is it possible the facts are true and the narrative's false? And the problem is this, it is interesting. You remember when BuzzFeed put out that dossier that they had not vetted, they had not bothered to vet. And the dossier, their excuse was, now you can go verify it yourself. And most people looked at that and said, what, are you crazy? Like, none of us have sources in Russia. It's not our job to go verify it ourselves. But to a certain extent, that's where we are in the media landscape, and it's not totally false. In the media landscape, everybody sort of is tasked with doing that now, determining what's true and what's false. And so I think that a pretty good rule of thumb, and it's made it difficult because of social media and the emphasis that exists on speed. If you're the first person to tweet something clever, you get 2,000 retweets. If you're the second person, you get 10. So there's a lot of focus on speed. But there is something to be said for the idea that better to be the second person reporting something after it's verified than the first person to report it and get it wrong. And so gives everything a few hours to settle out before immediately assuming they're true, or at least search the headline online to determine whether there's a second side of the story that's not being told yet. I also think that we've now entered this sort of poisonous cycle where the right says that the media on the left are false, and the left immediately says, okay, well, the right is lying about us. And so the left begins running more and more hysterical hit pieces against people on the right with worse and worse vetting, which, of course, only creates more animus from the right, which, of course, only creates more animus from the left. And so, I have sort of my own rules of thumb. Number one, as far as who to trust, one is, are they cautious about being the first one out there? Like, do they care more about accuracy than being the first one out there? And number two, I would say, is how quick are they to retract a story if it turns out not to be true? Are they quick to retract it, or do they try and double down on it as much as possible and try and say that it's true even when it's false? And does the story invariably back one side? If the story invariably backs one side, then I have a feeling the outlet is pretty bad, and that's why
useless.
That's why I've become not a fan of the site that I used to work for, Breitbart, because I think that they don't really bother to run an antagonistic side toward Trump. The entire thing is just, what did Trump do that's great today? And that doesn't mean that what they're saying about Trump isn't true sometimes, but it does mean that you sort of have to take everything with more of a grain of salt than you would if you saw it at a place that tends to try and speak more even-handedly on this.
Ben, do you know what I'm feeling lately a little bit guilty about? I feel like I'm speaking to a therapist. For years and years, in my columns and elsewhere, I've said, well, let's look at this stupid thing published in the Washington Post, this silly article or silly comment, or in the New York Times, or this stupid thing from CBS Evening News, let's say. But what I never say is there were 70 other things in the Washington Post today that were very good and from which one could learn. Never. I never say that.
Yeah, no. I think that's true.
So, for example, just recently, I think I believe it was a photo caption. Remember, it said something like the anti-intellectual David Galerner or something like that. Yep. We all wrote about it. We spent a couple of days on it, right, or maybe a week. I believe it was a photo caption, and there were 70 other things in the Washington Post that day that were rewarding, true, and rewarding, and right. And I never say so. And I just think, what if people like me or my counterparts did that with, let's say, National Review? You can find something stupid at National Review online every day, I'm pretty sure, and highlight it and sort of stigmatize us with it. So this is the kind of thing that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah, and I think that's right. It's also, part of that is due to the nature of the legacy media that doesn't exist in National Review. So National Review, here's the thing. In National Review or Daily Wire, everybody's got a byline. So like I run Daily Wire. So if somebody has a serious problem with Daily Wire, it's either going to be with me directly or it's going to be with a columnist who's got their name on something. And at National Review, if I don't like something by Victor Davis Hanson, which happens sometimes now that he's very much in Trump's camp, then I can say I don't like that piece by Victor Davis Hanson, and I can be critical of the piece by Victor Davis Hanson. The National Review did take it on the chin when they ran that against Trump issue, right? Because that was considered sort of the entire National Review board coming to bear. With the Washington Post, because
and of course we were praised and thanked for it as well by others.
Yeah, for sure. But for the people who we're talking sort of the antagonistic point of view, people didn't like it. They're ripping the entire board of National Review. Part of that is because National Review doesn't pretend to be an objective news source. I think that if the Washington Post were to come out and say, "Look, we're not an objective news source, right? We're going to report stuff, and a lot of it's going to be true." But
you're singing my song, yeah,
right. But
if only the New York Times would say, "Look, we are a great liberal or left of center newspaper.
Exactly.
Maybe the best in the whole English language. I'd be fine."
So would I. And this is why
the pretense is what's bad.
Right. How much time do conservatives, and here's the way you can tell, how much time do conservatives spend ripping on Salon.com or Slate as opposed, we make fun of them, but how much time do we spend really savaging them as opposed to the New York Times or Washington Post? how much time do we spend ripping into MSNBC as opposed to CNN? We spend a lot more time on CNN than MSNBC, and that's because everybody knows MSNBC is a lefty network. And so it's the lack of honesty and the prior warning. So, as I say, everybody knows where National Review stands politically. It doesn't make any great secret of that. I don't spend any time trying to debunk headlines at the Huffington Post. What's the point? We all know what the Huffington Post is. It's pretty clear about what it is. So but by the same token, what's happened is the left made the mistake of portraying left-wing reporting as objective reporting, and then the right made the mistake of saying that all leftist reporting is false. And so that's taking it one step too far. And that's where we are now, is these dueling narratives where people just say things that are blatantly false on both sides of the aisle, and their own side of the aisle believes them. So a plurality of Republicans now think that Donald Trump had an inauguration crowd that was bigger than Barack Obama's. And I'm sure a majority of Democrats believe that Donald Trump actually imposed a Muslim ban, even though his executive order is nothing of the sort. So everybody is sort of believing what they want to believe on their particular side of the aisle, and that gives the feeling that everybody's lying to you. You're constantly getting the feeling that everybody's, and that makes people paranoid, it makes people angry, and it makes people feel like they're being cheated. It makes them feel like conspiracies are out there to target the people they like and to elevate the people that they hate. And the polarization of the media climate is really terrible. And again, I think that's reinforced by the fact that we follow the people we like on Twitter. I don't know how many people on the left you follow on Twitter. I tend to follow a lot of objective reporters.
Almost nobody.
I follow a lot of people from kind of Washington Post, Politico, and then I follow some people on my own side. But I don't tend to follow a lot of people who are on the open left. No. And I think the same thing is true on Facebook for people, where we're being drawn into these smaller and smaller cloisters, and the internet makes that more available to us. That you're going to associate with people who are more like you, and you're going to be recommended to do that, because if you're an outlet like the Daily Wire, just to get kind of deep into the weeds here for a second, if you're an outlet like the Daily Wire and we have a Facebook page, or I have a personal Facebook page, I have an interest in supplying the readers to my Facebook page stuff that they want to click on, because I want to grow my Facebook page. And so this leads to an environment where if you don't have people who really care about truth, the easiest thing in the world is to just start shilling for one side or the other, or to just start shilling for a particular candidate. I mean, look, I think one of the great lies of this election cycle is that the people who were anti-Trump, conservatives who were anti-Trump, did it for the pay. I think it's the most absurd contention I've ever heard in my life. The people who did it for the pay,
risk. It was a professional risk.
The people who did it for the pay were clearly the people who are in favor of Trump. I mean, look, when's the last? And look at Breitbart's traffic. Breitbart's traffic, according to their own measures, went from 30 or 40 million page views a month, maybe 50 million page views a month, to 200 million page views a month, almost solely on the back of riding the Trump train. So there are a number of people who are on TV now all the time because they were part of the Trump train. Look, I'm not going to say that everybody who's doing that is doing that for the money, but by the same token, if you're going to accuse somebody of doing it for the money, you have to show how they actually benefited from doing something.
Ben, do you know people who will criticize Trump off the air but not on?
100%, yes. I know
Isn't that
many
weird? Isn't that weird? Because we're not politicians. It's bad enough when politicians are like that. We're journalists and writers. It's just it ought not to be, to borrow an old line.
Well, but we're scared. I mean, I think everybody is scared of the consumer, and that's that's the problem with art and news when it comes to the markets. And markets are a wonderful thing. I love markets, but just because Lady Gaga sells a bajillion records doesn't mean she's Beethoven. Yes. And just because people listen to Alex Jones doesn't mean that Alex Jones has anything of true value to say. So this is the danger in an area where you're trying to inculcate virtue or truth. The market does not always cater to virtue and truth. So I mean, not only do I know people who do that, I know people who were convinced by their companies, who were told by their companies that they had to toe the line, or they would be in danger of losing their jobs. And that's dangerous stuff. I mean, I speak from firsthand knowledge on that one. So it's really it's really negative, and it's going to be up to the American people, I think, at a certain point to say, I'm so sick of the polarized atmosphere that I'm willing to hear truth no matter where I get it. I mean, honestly, the only thing that I can say, this is very downbeat. The only thing that I can say that I think is a good thing is that I really personally I try to make an attempt to try and call balls and strikes and call it as I see it. And so on my own podcast, I do, for example, a thing called Good Trump, Bad Trump. And we have a jingle, and I try to say, here's what Trump did that was good today, here's what Trump did that was bad today. And our audience has been incredibly, it's grown incredibly. When we started off a year and a half ago, we had 3,000 listeners a day. Now we have in excess of 300,000 listeners a day. So our website didn't exist a year and a half ago. Now it has 30 million page views a month on that order. So I think that there is an audience for this. And I think that as time goes on, And as people become disillusioned with the idea that lying for fun and profit is the way to do this, there will be a reversion to a desire for truth. I think you're starting to see that a little bit, but
really?
It'll take a while.
I find that there's a lot of fear in our camp, Ben. Fear of readers, listeners, viewers, donors, TV appearances, speaking appearances, that sort of thing. And it's sort of pathetic to see journalists who are supposed to be, no fear of favor types, trembling. It's so odd.
It's odd, except for the fact that the ground has completely shifted. I was talking about this on my podcast today, that I feel like I said this to it's very troubling. I mean, I know I can sense that you're troubled by it. I'm really troubled by it because you spend your entire career thinking that you're part of a broad ideological movement, and then you realize that the broad ideological movement's like 7 people, right? That it's people who you personally know and have on your speed dial, and maybe half of those people are new because half of the people who were on your speed dial are gone now. And what happened before is there was sort of a view in politics on the right, anyway. I'm not as troubled by the left. The left, I can fully predict. I fully understand. The left is the left. They are what they are. What I'm troubled by on our side of the aisle is this idea that victory somehow alleviates the moral burden. So it doesn't matter if you lie. It doesn't matter if you're a bad person. It doesn't matter if you're decent. All that matters is that you win. And there's this halo effect that accrues to winning that allows you to escape moral culpability for doing bad things. And this is really upsetting to me because as somebody who believes that politics is intertwined with morality, the idea that I'm going to be okay with, for example, President Trump saying that we're just like Vladimir Putin because I like his policy on tax cuts, that's asinine to me. That doesn't compute. One thing does not make the other okay. But what I'm seeing is it used to be the politics on our side of the aisle was on one axis. It was left versus right. It was, and there's gradations to that, but you had the left, and then you had a bunch of in between, then you had the right. And now, if you think of that as the x-axis, now there's been a y-axis that's been added to politics, and that is pro-Trump versus anti-Trump, because there's a cult of personality that's been built up around victory. And so there's some people who are like you or like me, where I don't want to exist on the y-axis. I don't care about the y-axis. It doesn't make any difference to me. Trump is not an important person to me. Trump is just a person. And so if he does something good, then great. And if he does something bad, then that sucks. That's bad. I don't like that. But it means that if you are somebody who sees the y-axis and not just the x-axis, not just the right-left axis, but the Trump versus anti-Trump axis, what that means is that suddenly I'm now a moderate. I'm now a wishy-washy person, right? Because I'm at the 0 point on the y-axis. I'm at 0. I'm not up with Trump and I'm not down against Trump. I'm at 0. And if I drift down against Trump, then suddenly I'm in bad territory because I'm in a different quadrant. The people they like, the people that a lot of folks on our aisle, on our side of the aisle like, they like Mike Pence because Mike Pence is on the right. He's on that right-left axis. He's on the right, but he's also all the way at the top on that y-axis because he's on the right, but he is willing to back any silly thing that Donald Trump says or does. And I think this is going to be tenable for about 2 months, because I think that at a certain point,
I don't know.
Donald Trump. When I say tenable, I mean logically tenable, not emotionally tenable. I think this could last for years, right? I think this could, but I mean logically tenable because Mike Pence can say, "I'm all the way to the right, but I'm also really super pro-Trump," for as long as Donald Trump is pushing Judge Gorsuch. But the minute that Donald Trump starts pushing $1 trillion infrastructure packages, it's a little bit tougher. He's going to have to move to the left on that right-left spectrum in order to continue to be at the top of that Y spectrum.
How about equating the United States with Putin's Russia?
Yeah, exactly. Perfect example. I looked at that the other day, and again, I saw glimmers of that during the election. I mean, I was actually appalled by the VP debate.
If a left-wing figure had said that, we would talk about nothing else for a month.
It's Noam Chomsky stuff. It's Noam Chomsky stuff. I actually just wrote. Yeah. I actually just wrote a piece for National Review, actually, about this crisis of conscience that's happening inside kind of conservative intelligentsia, because there's so many people who want to find what's this nexus point between Trumpism and conservatism, and philosophically there really is not one. And this is sort of the problem. And there may be positional commonalities, but positional commonalities does not mean intellectual nexus. I have a lot of like Donald Trump has positions in common with Bernie Sanders. It doesn't mean they're ideologically aligned. And I'm sure you read that piece by Rich Lowry and Ramesh Ponnuru about nationalism and the attempt to pour the wine of creedal nationalism into the vessel of Trumpian European style blood and soil nationalism. I think this is a huge mistake, and I think that that's an impossibility too. But there's this struggle now to say, okay, well, Trump's in charge. We're either going to be on the train or trying to direct the train, or we're going to get run over. And my feeling is that it's not about the levers of power anymore. Now it's about just pure intellectual honesty. Because if we're fighting for the soul of a movement, or if we're fighting for something that's true, then I care a lot less about the policy, and I care much more about the future of an ideological movement if there's going to be one. Because you can cut taxes as much as you want. You can do all of the various things that you want policy wise. But if that means that you have a president if that means that your movement is basically now blood and soil nationalism as opposed to creedal nationalism based on the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, that's not America anymore. It's a country that has policies that I like, but it's not America.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're listening to Ben Shapiro, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire. We'll be back after a word from our sponsor. Are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates? Posting your job in one place isn't enough to find quality candidates. If you want to find the perfect hire, you need to post your job on all the top job sites. And now you can. With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites, including social media networks like Facebook and Twitter, all with a single click. Find candidates in any city or industry nationwide. Just post once and watch your qualified candidates roll in to ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. No juggling emails or calls to your office. Quickly screen candidates, rate them, and hire the right person fast. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by over 1 million businesses. And right now, Q&A listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. And of course, free trial is one word. That's ZipRecruiter, also one word, .com/free trial. Bear with it one more time. It'll be worth it. ZipRecruiter.com/free trial. Thank you and happy hiring. I'm Jay Nordlinger with Q&A, and we are talking with Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire. Ben, for many years we've mocked the left for its conformity, the great pressures to conform on the left. I find that the right has the same tendency, or gives into the same temptation. We're the home, we're the base of individualism, right? Got to be yourself. The pressures to conform are enormous on the right, proving that I guess that we're just all human.
Yeah, I think that's right. It takes a lot of wherewithal and self-awareness to say that you're willing to allow dissenting points of view, even if it means you lose. And I think that what I realized about this election cycle, during the election cycle, is that for all the people who claim that they're pro-liberty and pro-freedom and pro-individual dissent and all of this stuff, pretty much everybody on the inside is a little bit fascist, and which is pretty disquieting notion. But I think it's true. I think that everybody on the inside,
a truly liberal democratic soul, I think, is a rather rare thing.
Yeah, I think everybody on the inside is fine with fascism so long as it's the fascist of their choice. So right now, they're okay with things that on my podcast. I actually it's a video podcast, so I actually bring a shoe to the set. And I hold up the shoe and I say, I want you to put the shoe on the other foot. Because